So today, we are going to talk about one of the biggest, most celebrated breakthroughs in recent climate history. I'm talking about the Loss and Damage Fund. It was a moment that was decades in the making, hailed as a triumph of diplomacy and justice. Or was it? To really get why everyone was so excited, you have to understand just how long the wait was. For over 30 years, 3 decades, nations on the absolute front lines of climate change have been asking for help. We're talking about the countries that have done the least to cause this problem, but are, suffering the most from it.
And then boom, at COP27, it actually happened. An agreement, a real fund dedicated to helping vulnerable countries deal with climate disasters. And a year later, at COP28 in Dubai, they made it official. I mean, truly a historic moment.
And the scene was just incredible. The second the gavel fell on day one of the conference, the whole room just erupted. People were on their feet, clapping. You could just feel this massive sense of relief and joy. It really felt like you were watching history being made.
Which brings up a pretty good question. What was really going on there? Because once you get past all the back-patting and you start to peek under the hood of this supposedly historic agreement, well, you find a slightly different story. So let's break it down.
First things first, the money. I mean, a fund is only as good as the cash inside it, am I right? So let's follow the money and see what we're really working with here.
Okay, so this number, this is the estimated amount that developing countries need every single year to deal with the costs of climate change. $400 billion annually. That's the sheer scale of the problem we're trying to solve.
So, all right, keep that $400 billion number in your head. Now, with that figure in mind, how much do you think the world's nations managed to scrape together for this amazing landmark fund? Go on, take a guess.
$752 million. That's it. That's the grand total of all the pledges so far. And look, I know, it sounds like a lot of money until you remember that other number we just talked about.
And this is where it gets really fun. This chart puts those two numbers side by side. You see that tiny, almost invisible sliver? That's our 752 million. The rest of the circle? Yeah, that's the gap. The fund has less than 0.2% of what's needed for a single year. It's not a drop in the bucket. It's like the condensation on the outside of the bucket. And if you want to see where priorities really lie, just look at this. The United States, the largest historical emitter on the planet, pledged $17.5 million. Meanwhile, the U.S. government gives about $20.5 billion in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry every year. That is over 1,000 times more money to fuel the problem than to fix the damage it causes. Just let that sink in. Okay, so the money's a bit of an issue. But hey, surely they're working super hard to get that tiny little sliver of cash to the people who need it, right? Well, about that. First, we need a committee and some meetings. Lots and lots of meetings. Before a single dollar can actually go anywhere, the fund's brand new board has to meet, and then meet again. So after kicking things off in beautiful Barbados, they're jetting off to the Philippines, then Zambia, then back to the Philippines, twice. It's a very busy schedule of scheduling more meetings.
And what happens at these very important meetings? Well, vital work. Like this agenda item, which is all about approving money that has already been spent by the World Bank just to set the fund up. You heard that right. You have to spend money to approve spending money. It makes perfect sense.
And here's the 4-step process. Step 1, establish a committee. Step 2, approve the rules for that committee. Step 3, appoint people to the committee. And of course, the most crucial step of all, Step 4, you must formally disband the old, temporary committee that was basically doing the same job. Progress. But of course, while all this vital work of forming committees and approving minutes is happening in fancy conference centers, the actual loss and damage, it doesn't wait. This is what's really at stake. Real people, real communities, real lives. Oh, and running this whole machine isn't exactly cheap. Just look at the administrative budget. In the first 4 months of 2025 alone, they've already spent over $2.5 million on the board, the secretariats, and the trustee. That's money from the fund being spent to run the fund, long before it helps a single person recover from a flood.
But hey, don't worry, there is a plan. The very first phase of actual projects has a name.
It will be called the Barbados Implementation Modalities. Doesn't that just roll right off the tongue? It sounds less like urgent disaster relief and more like a clause in an end-user license agreement.
So why? Why all the bureaucracy? Why all the jargon? Well, it's because this entire fund is walking a very, very fine political tightrope, and it's all built around avoiding certain words.
See, the term loss and damage itself is a carefully chosen euphemism. It's a substitute for the words they're not allowed to use, words like liability and compensation, because those words imply that someone is actually responsible and that someone should have to pay.
And don't get it twisted, this isn't just some unspoken rule. It is written down in black and white. The Paris Agreement has a specific clause that says acknowledging loss and damage does not, under any circumstances, create a legal basis for liability or compensation. It's a fund built on the promise that no one can ever be legally held accountable for the damage they've caused.
So, if it's not about liability, what is it about? Well, it's about cooperation and facilitation. It's just a voluntary act of goodwill, a global partnership, not an obligation, and absolutely not an admission of guilt.
And speaking of cooperation, here's a quick little update for you. The United States, after pledging its generous $17.5 million, has quietly stepped away. Their seat on the fund's governing board? Yeah, it's vacant now.
All right, so let's try to wrap this all up. We've seen the grand promise, and we've seen the complicated reality. So what do we actually have here?
So, let's recap. After 3 decades of fighting, the world created a fund. This fund has a tiny fraction of a % of the money it actually needs. Its first order of business was setting up more bureaucracy. It's legally designed to make sure nobody can ever be held responsible, and its most important historical contributor has already quit the leadership team.
Which really brings us to a fundamental question, doesn't it? What is this thing for? Is it to deliver urgent aid to communities hit by disasters? Or is it to generate reports, host dialogues, and establish subcommittees?
And maybe that's the real question at the end of all this. It took 30 years of struggle to even get this fund. And yeah, it's underfunded, it's over-bureaucratized, it's politically toothless, but it exists. So is that a win? Is a symbolic, nearly empty gesture actually better than no gesture at all? I'll let you be the judge of that.